Corina. Welcome to the
Hi,
Cool Blog Podcast.
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, how are you doing today? How is the UK? How's the
I'm
weather?
I'm good. Actually, today it's good. We have some sun, so that's great for a change.
Yeah, it is. It is. Okay, maybe a brief introduction.
I am a Middle East specialist. I'm originally German, but I've lived in the UK, specifically London, for the best part of 20 years. And I have worked with lots of people from the Middle East. And when I say the Middle East, I predominantly mean the Gulf region. So Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, and Bahrain. And what I do now is I speak about what's happening in the Gulf. I help companies that have projects out there for their teams and their executives to understand Middle Eastern culture. What is the business etiquette? What do they need to know? What do these kind of countries want to achieve? And how is it generally very different from the way we do business in the UK or in Europe?
And your love for the Middle East, was it coincidental or it was something that just you were always interested in, or it just happened?
It was actually coincidental because I've worked in hospitality with like five-star hotels for quite a long time, and that's kind of how I fell into the Middle Eastern market because when I worked there, initially I was very unfamiliar with the Middle Eastern culture because I had never met anybody from there before. I don't speak any Arabic. Um, but I started learning very quickly, and it showed me that when you take an interest in the culture and you ask people questions, they're very happy to open up, to explain. But I also saw that obviously there were a lot of differences to the way we were doing business here. And I saw back at the time, like a lot of my colleagues struggled with this. And this obviously amplified with Saudi opening up in 2019 or 2018. And I got a lot of people asking me a lot of questions. What is Saudi like? What is it like? Is it safe to go as a woman? Do I need a chaperone? How do I dress? Will people even do business with me? I'm really scared. And that's how sort of my business very much came about because I kept being asked all of these things. And what I obviously saw when I was traveling out there, it was very different on the ground, but that was
Mm.
not reflected in the information that is available here in the UK, in Europe, and also in the US. So I thought, if I can be that person that is European, that is a woman, that doesn't speak the
Yeah.
language, who didn't grow up there, then I obviously understand the challenges coming from this side, and I can explain it through my own experiences.
Oh, interesting. And it's good you mentioned, like, you obviously you had some concerns. I think when we're not familiar with certain places, that is a natural thing because all we get to hear or what we know is what we hear till you start interacting. From a business perspective, how have you had to adjust, right? Has it been a huge change from what you know, working with people in the Middle East, and how has that affected your worldview? If I put it that way.
I think it's really like it really opened my worldview because, considering I came from like a very small town, I had no prior
Yeah.
exposure. It was so different to what I had experienced in my childhood. But what I found was that they were very open, their culture was very hospitable, and I think that really aligned with me. There were a lot of
Mhm.
very strong family values there. People would open up their homes, invite you to their homes. And I think that was just beautiful for me to see. And that wasn't necessarily reflected in the way people were portrayed over here in the media. So that's where that sort of disconnect was, where people just
Mhm.
didn't know enough about it. And there just wasn't enough information to show a different side. And that's kind of what I really wanted to do. And then of course also coming from, and I know we're going to talk about entrepreneurship, coming from like
Yeah.
full-time employment to becoming like an entrepreneur, having your own company is a huge step. It's a
Yeah.
very different undertaking and it requires a lot of different skills.
Um, and maybe we'll just go into that topic. You mentioned you came from a small town. Was entrepreneurship very prevalent where you came from? Or were you one of those who just had to break the norm and go right into it?
This is actually a really interesting question because when I
Mm,
grew up, entrepreneurship was basically non-existent. And the reason it was
mm,
non-existent is because I grew up in East Germany and I grew up in communism. So I didn't know anybody that was an entrepreneur because people all
mm,
worked for sort of like state factories or things like that. However, looking back now, I think I could always see that my dad had a lot of entrepreneurial traits. And I think if he had grown up in a different country or if he had grown up in
mm,
West Germany, I think this would have been a very different thing. So I think maybe this was somehow ingrained in me, even though I didn't know. And even though for, probably a good 16, 17 years, I've
mm,
worked for companies. And yeah, it was also not, you know, um, like these kind of books on entrepreneurship and mindset, they weren't something that was available in East Germany, but it was I guess I was always kind of looking for new opportunities. And I think with a lot of the decisions that I made, looking back now, they were quite fearless decisions. So, like, I've moved to
yeah,
London without knowing anyone, with not a lot of money in my bank account. And I kind of just made it work. And I always found new ways to sort of get by because my parents were not very wealthy. They couldn't like fund my lifestyle. And just to give some contrast, I mean, when I was living in Germany, um, I think my rent was something like maybe in pounds, like £300. When I moved to London, my rent was something like 800
yeah.
pounds. And it wasn't like that I had this kind of money in my bank account. And of course, when I
Mm,
moved, I did have a job before I moved, but the first month you don't get paid because they only pay you at the end of the month. So I had to kind of get by that first month somehow with paying my rent. And I mean, like, rent was a big word. I mean, this was a
yeah.
room that I rented. It wasn't like a flat or anything like that. But
Welcome to
I
London, I
kind of
guess.
yeah, but it's London. Yeah, yeah, true. But it's still a shock because
Yeah,
suddenly you're completely on your own and you have to look after your food, all your stuff that you need, like your travel card to get around. And it was really interesting because it I think it really quickly gave me the tools to sort of make the most out of what I
mm,
had. And that I think then served me very well much later when I started my company. Because obviously, if you work for a company, you have marketing, you have IT, you have
yeah,
PR, you have HR, you have all these different functions. And when you're on your own, that's all on you. There's nobody there who's going to do the work for you. I mean, of course, you can hire people, but for that, you need funds.
yeah.
So so I think you have to become resourceful and you have to try and see how can I make this work without even if I don't have a lot of means and without a lot of connections, or where can I find these connections and build up relationships. And that I think was something that I like I had learned very early on. It's all about forging the right relationships and understanding how this is going to work. Obviously, I didn't really understand how it was going to pan out long term, but that kind of relationship building skill set and these asking questions and wanting to learn more, that obviously served me very well later on.
While speaking, you mentioned some very key traits in typical entrepreneurs. One, boldness, right? I think that optimism, where you just know it's going to work out. How is it going to work? It's not fully defined, even with limited resources and help. Um, and probably you saw some of these traits earlier in yourself that made you make certain decisions. Are there other things you add to that list that maybe if people see that it might be an indication that maybe you're called to entrepreneurship? Are there other things you add to that list?
Yeah, I think most definitely. I think this and it just never stops. I think that ability to wanting to learn
Mm.
like in business from other people, take feedback, listen to some, but still follow with what you think is right is, I think, is very key. And there is, I mean, it never stops. It doesn't matter how long you've had your business, there's always going to be new challenges and there's going to be
Yeah.
new things that you have to overcome.
Oh, good. Thanks for sharing. I'll say in details your movement. And then you mentioned you worked for different organizations before you started yours. And there was a period where you had to move from that to your own business. What were some of the things you had to learn? I know you mentioned doing things yourself because you don't have a lot of teams actually set up for you. You have to build things ground up. But what was that transition phase like for you? Were there some days you woke up and you were like, maybe this was a bad idea. I should have stuck with the corporate world, or did you just there was that complete switch for you? How did it work?
That's actually really funny because I never thought I should stop. That was
Mm,
actually not ever something that crossed my mind. I think it was kind of more just sort of like learning on the job, finding like an accountant, starting to learn more about social media, starting to learn more about branding, like starting to learn about online marketing. And I mean, some of the things, if I look back now, like they make me laugh, like I had somebody design like almost like a homepage, but it was just one page for my website.
yeah,
And I thought people were just gonna miraculously find me, and there wasn't really much on there. And then nobody actually emailed. And I was like, oh, I thought I'm just gonna put this website out there and then people will just come. And obviously, then I had to learn, well, this is not how it works. You need to kind of
yeah.
also market and build a brand and things and all of these kind of things. So that was really, really interesting. But I guess what served me really well is that I always had a lot of natural curiosity and I was always
Mhm,
very quick to adopt new things. Because, when I grew up in East Germany, like we didn't have computers or things. I mean, like I lived in a house, there were 10 flats in there. I was telling somebody
mhm.
yesterday that story. And out of the 10 flats, only one flat had a telephone, like nobody else did. So it was kind of really wild. I mean, it sounds like now
Mm.
where everybody has their phone and their
Yeah,
email, and everything, like it sounds like as if this was from a different century, and it really does feel like that. But one of the things I always had is I had this curiosity. So when mobile phones came out, like,
yeah,
like I adopted it really quick. Same with email, same with social media. And I saw a lot of people struggling with this because people were just not using it. And they're like, oh no, why would I share my life and this and that?
yeah.
And it's really interesting. I think we forget that social media wasn't really around until 2006, 2007,
Yeah.
really, when Facebook started, and then Instagram only started, I think, what was that, maybe, I don't know, 2010, 2011, something like that. And I remember at the time saying to the company that I worked for, I think we really need to get on Instagram. And they were like, oh, I think we have to discuss it with head office and whatever. And I thought, oh my God, like how small-minded. But I still see this in people today. And this is so
Yeah,
interesting because now I'm having this conversation about LinkedIn and people like, oh, but if I'm on LinkedIn, people think I'm looking for a job. I'm like,
good job.
no, that's not true. And or somebody said to me, oh, from a big company, they said, oh, Corina, LinkedIn is managed by our HR. I'm like, it should be managed by your digital team because it's a digital resource and it's a social media and people use it as social media. And it's really interesting how a lot of companies are very, very slow to adopt. And that is very different to the Middle East because in the Middle East, they're very fast to adopt.
Mm.
Everyone is on social media. They're on multiple channels. They probably know more about the hottest restaurant in London than I do, or you do, or anybody else does. But people here still think they don't. So it's this really interesting dynamic where people think, oh no, no, they don't know enough. But they probably know a lot more than you do. So it's that I think requires a shift on so many people's parts. But for me, that was never a struggle. I'm always happy, like if I don't know something, I'll find a way to figure it out. If I don't know how to do this or that, I mean, like now we have YouTube, we have so many free resources where we can find information. It's actually, I think, it's never been easier to have a business because you can look up everything you need, which of course then has its other challenges because there's too much
Yeah.
information. What do you listen to? But I think, it's been so much easier to find stuff and everybody has that at their disposal. But of course, I think entrepreneurship is very much like a roller coaster, Sometimes it's
Yeah.
up, it's really amazing, and sometimes it's not going so well. And of course, if you add to this whole thing then social media, because if you look on social media, you think, oh my God, these people are killing it. But behind the
Yeah.
scenes, the struggle is real because maybe, you think they are killing it, but there's a lot of things in the background that are challenges and that are big obstacles that they probably never share. So I think what many people shouldn't forget is that we only ever see the highlight reel of somebody else's life, and this is not their whole life.
Indeed. And I think you touched on some very key points. The first one being the use of social media and how it is perceived. Even as someone who works with an organization, I know when I started, people were like, "Are you not concerned that they're going to say you're looking for a job?" I said, "No, I'm expressing myself, right? As long as I get what I'm supposed to do done, right? It's the age where you should build your own brand because both for the organization, for your personal goals, it's going to be very essential, right? I think where people still struggle is thinking that, okay, they have maybe a closed mindset towards what is possible and what it can be used for. And it's also interesting to hear when you say things like, oh, when you said in the Middle East, people are online more than we think. I think, yeah, that perception is something we need to re-educate ourselves across board. Yeah. No, good. So if someone wants to go into this roller coaster journey, like you mentioned, um, well, what are some things maybe they can just equip themselves with to make sure that it's I wouldn't say take away that whole journey because it will play in, but maybe there are some things they can do to limit that sinusoidal movement and have a bit of stability with the internet, with different tools, with people. What are some things you think they can do while coming into entrepreneurship?
I think, in my opinion, the biggest thing that you need to work on, and you can't just work on this once, I think you need to work on this day in, day out, every single day, is mindset, because only 20% is
Mm,
skill, 80% is mindset. So and with that mindset, I would also say it's about if something happens that isn't what you expected or you perceive this as a setback or bad or in whatever way, the way you deal with this and the way you reframe the narrative is very
yeah,
important. So I think it's you have to ask, what lesson did it teach me? How can this actually move me forward and make me grow this situation rather than, sit there and self-pity and say, oh my God, why is this happening to me? This is all just so bad. So you have to really flip a switch and work on your reframing and say, maybe there is a reason why this happened. I cannot see the reason just yet, but maybe I can see the reason in 6 months or in a year's time because it moved me into a different direction. And it's actually, really good for my growth. And I think that to me is the most important thing. So the more videos you can watch or people listen to or podcasts or whatever it may be, or read books on mindset and how to conquer your fears and how to get rid of these limiting beliefs and stop listening to what people are saying about you because they're probably saying less than you think because a lot of
yeah,
it is in your head. That I think is the most crucial skill as an entrepreneur. And then the second one is to take action, even if it's not perfect. I mean, we all want certain conditions to be perfect, or I'll do this when I have this resource. No,
yeah.
try and find a resource and do it now, because imperfect action is always better than if you sit on it and you never do something about it, and with every little step that you take, you learn something new, and then it compounds, and more people get to know about you, and more people see, what you stand for, and you just have to be open to change, to adapt, ask more questions. I think, yeah, I think there's a lot, and I think it's not for everybody, 100%. But I think if you work on your mindset and you have a growth mindset, you will always win.
No, indeed. And I know maybe some people might not become entrepreneurs, but even in the corporate world, you need that strong mindset, that courage to climb up the ladder. Some of our senior leaders, when I hear them speak, I'm just amazed at the amount of pressure they are able to handle, and with the questions and probably different things, they're still able to manage it well. So you're spot on. It's 80% mindset, 20% what you actually do, and people should move in that direction. Let's talk about branding now. Another point you raised is we build a very good website. We expect everything to go well. I think I fell into that trap multiple times. See, I realized it's not how beautiful your website looks, but how much you engage people, how much you build a brand that is known for something. What are some things they can do to build a very strong brand? We can see your brand is growing, at least on LinkedIn. How are you able to do this? And how are you able to communicate what you do in such a clear method, clear manner that people see the value and actually ask for your services?
I think it's work in progress. I think you just have to
Mm,
put yourself out there, and continuously to share your message, because not everybody is going to see everything. And again, it's all these other things. It's You have to be consistent. It's no good just to do it once and then forget about it. You
mm,
need to do it. I mean, for me, I think probably now, for maybe 2 or 3 years, I've literally consistently posted every single day. And you have
mm,
to test and see what works. And not every post will work really well. Some of them get more engagement, some of them get more views. But essentially, the views and the engagement means nothing if you can't convert any clients on the back of it. Because then it's literally just a vanity metric. And I think for that, yes, brand building is one thing online, but I think you also need to, especially now after COVID, you need to do brand building in person again. So you need to go to networking events.
yeah,
And one of the things that I would say is a really interesting thing with networking events, and I still find this, I go to some events where I think there's so many people that are in a particular kind of area that I don't know nothing about, and you feel really out of place. But these are the rooms you need to be in more, because this is where the real learning and the real growth is going to happen, because that's where you're going to start to learn about other things, where you're going to meet interesting people. And the more you can put yourself in uncomfortable situations, and that's the same with brand building, because again, so
yeah.
many people have so many fears about, what are people going to say? What my colleagues are going to think? What's my family going to think? Like, you need to forget about this, because everybody has that fear. But if you don't put yourself out there, then there's like nobody else can build that brand for you except you. And in order to do that, you have to work on all these limiting beliefs that you have. So
The irony is once you even step out there, you realize you have more people cheering you on than people actually trying to bring you down. And this is something people don't realize. They're so concerned about, am I getting it right? Is it perfect? It doesn't have to be perfect. It's work in progress. We just keep going. And yeah, oh, thank you. So outside of entrepreneurship, I know we've talked about building amazing business. What do you do for fun? Because I believe in work-life balance. I know it means different things to different people. How are you able to keep that in check as an entrepreneur? Balance your life, make sure you still have real relationships. Let's put it that way.
I mean, first of all, I have a husband and a 12-year-old son, so that
Yeah.
first of all keeps me grounded. My son keeps me very grounded, and especially in the beginning, when I used to say to him, "Oh, I have 10,000 followers on LinkedIn," he's like, "Mommy, the world has 7 billion people. You have 10,000? That's really not much. I was like, oh, okay, bring me back down to earth here. So, like if you have kids, they always ground you the most and they always like
Yeah.
look at your achievements in a different way. So that's obviously one thing. I do love traveling, which is great because a lot of it comes with my job. And then the other thing I actually do, which is interesting, I do this not only for fun, but also for mindset. I do like cold water swimming. I swim all year round
Hmm.
outdoors.
Oh,
And the colder it is, the better it is for your mind.
I'm
It's
already
really
freezing just hearing you say that. Like it's so chilled outside. Can you go swimming in this temperature?
yeah. I think the
Oh,
lowest water temperature I've gone, like I go at Christmas, at New Year. I think the lowest water temperature is like 1 degree or something. I think at the minute it's probably about 10, which is not too
yeah.
bad. I know for a lot of people, like my mom will call me and be like, "Oh my God, like I can't believe, like how do you even go in there?" I'm like, no. But again, it's a training issue. And it's a training thing. I've trained my brain when I go to the specific place in London. They have like this a couple of places called ponds, which are like tiny like lakes, I would say. And I've literally trained myself to when I go there, I go down the ladder and I go in. And I'm also one of these people that goes on holiday that will be like in the in the sea, like, oh, it's a
Yeah.
little cold. My husband like, you go cold water swimming. This is random. Like, why? I'm like, but this is a different thing because it's a different scenario. And
Yeah.
and I've trained myself when I go there, I go in without any questions. So
Mm.
it's really it's a big mindset thing, and I love it. I really do. People think I'm crazy, but I love it.
I enjoy swimming, but I don't know at the temperature if I can do it. Usually, if it's too cold, well, I will try, but yeah, I run out as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Because there's more to life, right? We do this to help people. We do this to make a life, but importantly, spending that time with people who we love and that truly care about us. So, thank you for sharing. If people want to reach out to you, how do they do that?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Corina Goetz. My website, all my other stuff is on there. I'm on Insta. My company is called StarCat, star-cat, CAT. Basically, StarCat stands for 5-star consulting and training. And
Interesting.
yeah, I know. Because people are like, what is this? A space cat, star
Yeah.
cat, whatever. I'm like, no. It's, there is a meaning behind it. And so on Instagram, I'm under starcat underscore Corina. So you can find me on like lots of different social medias, but I think the ones that I do most is sort of like LinkedIn and Instagram.
All right. Thank you. And I'm sure people will reach out to just learn more around what you do and connect with you. It's been nice having you on the podcast today, just sharing your experiences.
Thank
Thank you
you.
once again. Yeah, and
Thank you so
enjoy
much.
the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.